Hey, Life Groups. It's great that we can continue on in this Lent series focusing on Brian Zahn's book, The Wood Between the Worlds, that looks at the cross of Christ as the symbol that bridges the two kingdoms, the kingdom of this world and the kingdom of heaven. And this week, we looked at the story of Jesus' death, particularly the episode where he was condemned to die by Pontius Pilate, the Judean ruler, the provincial ruler in the Roman Empire. And in that story, we see the collision of those two systems as Pilate increasingly is backed into a corner, probably not wanting to crucify Jesus, but being backed into the corner on the technicality that Jesus claimed to be a king. And no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't kind of escape it, and increasingly powered up, even with Jesus, to try to create another alternative where Jesus was increasingly surrendering himself to the will of God as his calling to be the savior of humanity. And we increasingly see this contrast between the power of Pontius Pilate and the self-emptying, others-oriented, sacrificial love of Jesus. And so what we want to do as a life group today is to actually reflect on how the wood between those worlds contrasts those two systems. How the cross is not only a representative of Jesus' sacrificial love, but also one of society's power, which is what it would have been known as in the first century. And not only appreciate that the cross represents the collision of those two systems, but the fact that those two systems continue to live in our lives today. We looked at Galatians chapter 5, where the Apostle Paul contrasts what he calls the acts of the flesh with the fruit of the Spirit. The flesh and the Spirit being his language for the reality of those two systems in our hearts, of power versus sacrificial love colliding. And the truth is that those systems exist in each of our hearts. I know they exist in mine. In so many ways, I can default to the operating system of the world and choose power and privilege and apathy and complacency and power up in relationships. But to the degree that we want to follow Jesus and want to default increasingly to his sacrificial love, let's have some conversation about where we find ourselves tempted to default the other way, and process in our lives how those two systems collide in our life and work and relationships. So I hope you have a great conversation about this, especially as we prepare to celebrate the realities of Good Friday and Easter Sunday next week. So in this last week in the series of Lent, let's give some thought to the wood between the worlds and consider these two operating systems in which we want to drive our lives. The system that drives the kingdom of this world, that operates according to power, especially the power to dominate and destroy and ultimately to kill, or the system of the kingdom of heaven, defined ultimately by Jesus' self-sacrificing love for you and me. Have a great conversation, everybody.